Boarded the cruise. Oh. Goodness.
Up to you. Open air would be great. Quấy cả này đi.
We boarded the cruise now. I'm enjoying in the company of my wife and younger son Ramakrishna Sai. Oh my goodness, beautiful. ఎక్కడ ఇదా ఎక్కడ రైట్ రైట్ పర్ఫెక్ట్ వ్యూ. సో అప్పర్ deck capacity 300 persons. Excellent view of Seattle.
Good afternoon, folks. Happy Sunday. Welcome aboard the Sales Explorer in our 1 hour harbor tour. My name is Lars. I'll be your tour guide for the next hour or so. We'll point out the sights here around our trip. It should be a nice hour out here on the water. I'm really happy you could come out and join us today. Before we get too far along, just wanted to quickly let you know about the second deck refreshment bar. We have the bartenders hard at work for you, and they have all sorts of local beers on draft here in the area, local wines, local spirits. If you're looking for a cocktail, we can make all sorts of fun stuff. To the most popular, really throughout the years, probably the Huckleberry Lemonade, which is really good, local Huckleberry vodka, lemonade, soda water. That one's always nice and refreshing. We can make margaritas, but this is one of our 2 happy hour cruises, so we're gonna feature a couple different cocktails that there's a little bit of a discount on. That includes the Blackberry Mule as well as the Pier 55 Peach Tea, which is kind of like a peach bourbon tea, and then it is going to be happy hour for our wines, so discounts on our wines as well as a couple of our different beers, including Bailey's Pale Ale and the Rainier, a couple staples here in Seattle. As far as non-alcoholic stuff goes, we have food products, water, juices, coffee, hot chocolate, tea, hot apple cider, all sorts of good stuff. And then as far as snacks go, popcorn, which I'm sure all of you smelled as you walked on the boat. We also have some lighter snacks out in front of the bar, and then some sandwiches back here behind the bar if you're looking for something maybe a little bit more substantial. With that, I'm going to pass it over to
Ronique and Kara down at the second deck bar, all sorts of things to eat and drink down there. So if you're hungry or thirsty at any point throughout the cruise, definitely go down and visit them. Or if you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask any questions that you have. And before we officially cast off our lines, get underway, I do have a brief pre-recorded safety announcement for you.
The boat you're traveling on today is the Salish Explorer. It is Coast Guard certified and inspected to carry up to 500 passengers. That means we have life-saving equipment on board for all of you. Life jackets can be found underneath the perimeter bench seating in the bow of the first and second decks, as well as under the forward stairwell on the first deck, and in the cabinets behind the pilot house on the third deck. Placards with donning instructions can be found throughout the vessel. In the event of an emergency, life jackets will be made available and proper donning instructions will be given.
The Salish Explorer is equipped with life floats and life rafts, which crew have been trained to deploy in the event of an emergency. Emergency exits can be found on the first deck on both the port and starboard sides. Please refrain from touching any of the life-saving equipment unless instructed to do so by uniformed crew. Restrooms can be found on the first and second decks, with the larger, more accommodating restrooms on the first deck. The Salish Explorer is a non-smoking vessel. This includes e-cigarettes and extends to all areas of the boat, so we thank you for not smoking while on board.
While underway, we do tend to rock around from the wakes and waves of other vessels, so be sure to use caution and use all handrails when moving around. Also, please keep an eye on small children. Thank you for cruising with us.
With that, we are underway. One last time, welcome aboard the Salish Explorer on our 1 hour harbor tour. My name is Lars. Happy Sunday. Hope everybody's doing all right today. Should be a nice hour out here on the water. A lot to see. I think a pretty good way to spend your Sunday afternoon. So before we get too far along, I'll just let you know a little bit about myself. My name is Lars. Been working here for quite a while. Grew up here in this area, born and raised. Really love the Pacific Northwest and love
excellent.
To be able to kind of show off the city a little bit, talk about our waters, our mountains, the wildlife, the history. Not as much our local sports teams necessarily right now. Mariners once again missing the playoffs, but we will still talk about them a little bit later on our tour. That's enough about me, though. Kind of curious about you folks. Any other locals on board that are from the area at all? One person to fact check me. Anybody been on this tour before? Couple of return visitors. Love to see that. Who's in Seattle for their first time? Everybody else, welcome to town. Glad to have you. September, I think, is the best month to be here in Seattle. I know we're kind of getting to the end of it, but a lot of nice days like today with some sunshine to be out on us. Crispy temperatures, but I really think it's a nice time to be out here. One thing I want to get squared away before we get too far along is just some boat lingo 101. So 4 quick boat terms to kind of know which direction to look when I mention them. The front of the boat is called the bow, the back of the boat is called the stern. If you're facing the bow, off to your left is the port side, and off to your right is the starboard side. Port and left both have 4 levels, so that's easy trick to remember it. And opposite of that is right and starboard. So with that, we are squared away, ready to get rolling. One of the first things we see on our tour is just up ahead of us. This blue here with the white trim around the windows, that's the aquarium at Pier 59. So anybody been to the aquarium yet? This is a great place to take the kids. Put your hands up. This aquarium, I think, is a little bit unique in the fact that you're not going to find any performances or shows necessarily. It's more of a research and education-based facility. There is, though, one trained animal at this aquarium, and her name is Mishka. Mishka is a little sea otter that developed asthma back in 2015. So the thing she knows how to do is use her own inhaler. They taught her to basically bump the little inhaler with her nose to self-medicate, which I think is both practical and also pretty adorable, and definitely makes her a star at the aquarium. In addition to that, there's also some other really cool exhibits. And actually, you've been to the aquarium before, but it hasn't been for, I should say that it hasn't been in the last 3 weeks or so. Go back to the aquarium. There's a whole new wing that just opened up, and it's actually just starting to come into view right now. This wood side of the building off to the right is the Ocean Pavilion that just opened up not too long ago. You don't even have to go into the aquarium apparently to see a little bit of marine life. You can just look off to the starboard side of the boat. There are some sea lions down in the water over here. One kind of popping its head out of the water. If you don't see them right now, that's okay. I will personally guarantee we'll see 24 more later on in our tour. But again, if you're looking off to your right, you might see some swimming through the water. Just kind of up above this walkway that comes down off to our right is Pike Place Public Market. So if you look off to your right, over your right shoulder, you'll find a yellow building with a green roof on top of it. Pike Place is the #1 most visited spot in Seattle. I would never call this a tourist trap. I think it's a really authentic part of Seattle. Place that locals definitely spend a lot of time at. So some of the things you'll find up at Pike Place include vendors selling produce and artwork and coffee, of course. In fact, the oldest remaining Starbucks in the world can be found up at the market. Maybe the most quintessential Pike Place experience is going up there and check out the fish market. If you're not going to go up and buy some fresh fish, you can hang out in front of the counter and watch it fly from one person to the next. That famous fish toss might be the most quintessential Pike Place experience. In total, there's about 500 vendors that have been around for almost 107 We are going to finish up a little bit after 5 p.m. tonight, and so I would recommend if you are going to go up to the market, if you have some more time in Seattle, go there tomorrow sometime during the middle of the day, and you can get a kind of experience the market before it is full.
జాగ్రత్త ఏంటి ఆంటీ ఓ
Again, our cruise season is basically early April through the end of October, and in that span, this service is about 275 cruises.
Norwegian Encore, the name of the ship, very big ship.
Ships will reposition in their winter homes, so that could be down in New Orleans.
Yeah,
There's a ship
people are waving their hands here.
from Seattle. It'll be the Panama Canal and end up down in New Orleans 2.5 weeks later.
My goodness.
Other ones will do similar cruises, repositioning cruises to Fort Lauderdale or Tampa. And then some of the other ones are repositioned down to Australia. That's obviously a little bit longer journey, but you can have all these ships for, say, 5 weeks or so, and eventually get them out. Get a little bit farther along here, we're starting to get a nice look at the Space Needle just up ahead of us and off to the right. We'll see the Space Needle a few more times throughout our tour. I want to focus on right now is this building just down below the Needle here on the water. This is the Edgewater Hotel. So it was built for the sense, and 0 of the 9 million people ended up checking into their room here at the hotel. And that's because they didn't finish building it until 2 weeks after the fair was open. So they ran into a few construction delays along the way. Once they opened up, they didn't struggle too much to get people in the door. I think the location is going to sell itself. One thing that they advertised though is the fact that you could fish from your room. So baby taco shop down in the lobby to get you all set up, and you can fish out of your window or off your balcony. And this is really popular because there are fish to be caught out here in these waters, and it was great for pretty much everybody
Did you
involved.
come with me? Some cruise.
Who was finding fish laying around the rooms, fish guts in the sink, in the bathtub, and the carpet. It takes a while to get that smell out of there. So unfortunately, if you're staying at the Edgewater, you're not going to be allowed to fish anymore. Pretty cool consolation prize is you will be able to say you stayed at the same hotel the Beatles stayed at when they were here in Seattle. If anybody's seen a photograph of the Beatles leaning out of the window with fishing poles in hand, you know where it was taken. If you haven't seen it, just a quick Google search, Beatles Seattle. It's going to be the very first picture that comes up. So I caught a photograph, put that hotel on the map. It seems like every other famous rock band that's come through over the years has also stayed at the Edgewater. We have just a couple more piers to go here on our main central waterfront. And I'm not used to seeing a cruise ship here, but just off to our right, we're seeing the stern of one of these Lindblad National Geographic cruise ships, much smaller cruise ships than we're used to seeing in Seattle. These ones do some really, really cool excursions. Some of these cruises are a little bit longer than those week-long ones we see in Seattle. And then actually way out in the distance, you might have noticed this earlier before me, but if you look towards like our 11 o'clock position, you can see one cruise ship. Maybe it's going north through Puget Sound. That one is on a one-way trip from Vancouver to here in Seattle, which it stopped today. And then for the next few days, it's going to end up going down the coast to Los Angeles. From there, it'll reposition and go to Tampa. So go through the Panama Canal there in Tampa for the winter months. Cruise season down in the Caribbean. Alright, now that we've cleared up the central waterfront, we're going to get a really nice view of the Space Needle up and off to the right. So good chance to get your cameras out and snap some photos. This is not the last view of the Needle we're going to have today, but it's a good photo walk. And so some really cool sculptures here just off the water. It's part of the sculpture park. And two in particular stand out. That red one just underneath the needle is called Eagle by an artist named Alexander Calder. So it's kind of an abstract idea of an eagle. And then if you really want to kind of look over your shoulder, back at our 4 o'clock position, whether you know it or not, there's a big face looking back at you. Kind of tucked back there behind your 70. It's called Echo, which is supposed to be looking out towards the big mountains. Again, we're going to get an awesome view of our skyline for about 15 minutes or so, about 10 minutes from now. So that'll be a really nice photo op.
చాలా బాగుంది ఎక్సలెంట్ వ్యూ
Right now, one of my favorite parts of our waterfront, and I think the most underrated stretch here along the waterfront for sure, and that's Myrtle Edwards Park, just off to the right. You see a lot of people taking advantage of it today. People down near the water, other people just hanging out there in the park or going for a little walk. Myrtle Edwards Park continues for about a mile and a quarter along the waterfront. And it's always tough to tell what our sunsets are going to look like just because of the clouds and whatnot. But sun will set tonight a little bit before 7 p.m. We've been getting some really amazing sunsets, even partially cloudy days here in Seattle. So keep that in mind for a little bit later. If it looks like we'll have a nice sunset view, Myrtle Edwards Park off to the right is a great place to watch that. One thing you're not going to see a whole lot of are people out swimming in this water. And that's not because it's real polluted and gross or anything like that. It's more because of how cold this water is. Obviously today is not the warmest day up here for us, but when we have super low temperatures here in Seattle, 85 to 95 degrees, you rarely see people swimming out in this water, and that's because it doesn't warm up too much. The warmest I've ever seen on a day was 58 degrees. That was on the hottest day in the history of Seattle. It was 110 degrees. Water got 58 degrees. The big reason I checked is because we all decided we were going to jump in the water after we got off our ship to make it would feel good, but cooled us down a little too much. So this water stays really cold. And again, you can feel for yourself if you want to dip your toes in the water there at the park later on. But definitely would recommend going first. One last park mention for you real quick. I told you we're going to have a nice view of our skyline from the water. If you want the most iconic view of Seattle skyline, go up there to the hill off to our right. That hill's called Queen Anne Hill. And up there on top of the hill are 3 towers, as well as Carey Park. So Carey Park, it's going to give you that view of our skyline where the Space Needle is like the tallest building in the city, and everything else is perfectly centered back behind it in the background. It's a view that's been featured on everything from Frasier to Grey's Anatomy. Shows most of those live
I was
there.
focusing mostly on
That
space
postcard
reading.
of our city, and totally worth a trip up there to the top of it. I also think that every Seahawks game I've ever watched, they've showed 2 things. At some point throughout those broadcasts, they've showed the fish toss up there at the
could have
market. They've showed that view from
brought
Carey
the
Park, 2
sweater.
essential Seattle things, and I think both things should be on your list while you're here in Seattle to go experience too. So we are going to take, I wouldn't call it a detour, but we're going to take a slightly different route than usual. You can see up ahead of us, there are 2 boats helping this large ship into our grain terminal, which is just off to our right. If you've been down and walked around the waterfront this weekend, you might have, I don't know if you made it this far, but you might have noticed the big ship that was sitting there at our grain terminal. That left just a couple hours ago, and this one is going to take its place. Grain, for some reason, is Seattle's #1 export by volume. It's the #1 thing we send out of this city, even though we don't really grow it here in Western Washington too much. The reason that we send a lot of grain out of Seattle is more because of our location on the West Coast. Seattle, compared to some of those California ports, is about a day closer by boat to our trading partners across the Pacific over in Asia. We're a little bit further west. We also have the curvature of the earth working to our advantage. So once this corn and soybeans is growing out in Kansas and Iowa and Nebraska, it's sent here to Seattle, where they're loaded into these ships, and those ships will cross the Pacific and across over to Asia. Yeah, in addition to me just telling you that the ship is empty, you can also kind of tell by looking at the side of the ship. It's sitting pretty high up out of the water. There's the red paint down below and the black paint up above. Where those two colors of pink meet is right about where the plimsoll line is, or the international load line. So as they load more and more grain onto the ship, they'll sink lower and lower into the water. The ship that left just a couple hours ago had that line sitting right about at the water level. So that was way lower than this one is. Yeah, that's right about where the plimsoll line is. I'd say that's probably the most useless piece of information I'll give you over the 60-minute tour, but something that you can keep in the back of your mind. Cruise around, we'll check out container ships and all sorts of other vessels with a similar kind of two-tone paint job here. We're kind of losing the camera right now, but just from the bow of that ship, I noticed that white complex. You'll see it get here in just a minute. It's a hit speed. Still a lot of Seattle. The online travel company. Completely blocked by this ship here off to our right, but we'll get another look at it in a second. Massive complex and about 10,000 employees based out of Seattle. Additionally, to our right, it's kind of cool to watch these tugboats hard at work right now, super powerful vessels, but additionally we have these big fishing boats and one more cruise ship in town at the north end of the bay. The Excellence is a big fishing boat there at the end of Pier 90. I know Seattle's known for seafood and fishing. We have a lot of fishing boats based out of Seattle, a lot of great seafood restaurants in town. I think one thing that surprises folks is that there's almost zero commercial fishing that takes place here in these waters. Pretty much all these big fishing boats are going to be fishing up in the waters off of Alaska, but just based out of Seattle. I said almost zero commercial fishing because actually we'll see a couple small examples of some commercial fishing towards the end of our tour. Some of the local Native American tribes have put out some gill nets down near the shipping port and down near the mouth of the Duwamish River, so we'll see some of those a little bit. Then yeah, one other cruise ship in town, the Majestic Princess. In fact, if you're hopping on a cruise here out of Seattle the next few days, and it's any cruise line other than Norwegian, you're probably going to be hopping on that cruise there in Pier 91. So Carnival and the Royal Caribbean and Celebrity and Princess all part out of this here as well. Actually really amazing. They give these ships 12 hours to pull into the dock, put their passengers off the boat, board another group of passengers after they've cleaned up the boat, done everything they need to do to get that boat ready, and then they get off the dock and that 12-hour window closes. So pretty amazing how it works. Alright, at this point here, we are going to start to make a little bit of a turn, and we're going to go to check out some of the other areas around Puget Sound. And so before we really kind of swing around here, I'll point out West Seattle, which is just ahead of us and off to our left. Kind of looks like an island from here, almost the shape of an upside down frying pan with a handle being off, kind of at our 11 o'clock position. But West Seattle is a big peninsula that wraps around. These folks are going to have Seattle addresses that put out there. Same for us to our right, that land is closest to us off our starboard side is the Magnolia neighborhood. Once again, still part of Seattle. What is an island though is out ahead of us in the distance. Everything between like our 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock position, that's all Bainbridge Islands. I'm not sure if anybody's been over to Bainbridge at all.
Just to hold it.
Really cool area though. It's one of the most populated islands throughout Puget Sound. Thanks a large part to its proximity to Seattle. It's a 35-minute ferry ride from one side to the other. Costs about $10 round trip to walk on the ferry. So I always encourage people, if you feel like you want a little half-day excursion, hop on one of those ferries, go over to Bainbridge. Everything in terms of restaurants and shops are super walkable from that ferry terminal on the Bainbridge side. And then buy your round trip ticket on the Seattle side, you scan it on the Seattle side, you can throw it away from there. Don't even need the ticket to get back on over on Bainbridge. And head back over to Seattle. So those ferries run most of the day, pretty early morning until real late at night. And yeah, a lot of cool things to do over on Bainbridge. If you want any specific suggestions down later in the tour, I'll be happy to write some stuff down for you. But the one thing I always like to mention about Bainbridge is that that's when pickleball was invented back in 1965. So birthplace of pickleball, it's the state sport here in the state of Washington. I feel like a lot of us that grew up here in this area, I grew up playing it in elementary school and whatnot, but I love that it's picked up a lot of steam as of late. I know it's a little bit controversial if we have any tennis players on board, but I think it's a great game for all generations. Alright, at this point here, I'm going to direct your attention to the other side of the boat, and we'll check out our skyline for a few minutes. After that, I'll give you some peace and quiet and ride for a little while.
Yeah.
We're going to start with the Space Needle, easiest building to pick out here in Seattle.
left hand.
Standing there
Yeah,
on the north end of our skyline. Here in Seattle, they've done a really good job of protecting the Space Needle. Even though it's the ninth tallest building in the city, none of the other real tall skyscrapers.
So I'm enjoying Seattle by
has an incredible
on the
view.
cruise. It's a great experience in my life.
The highest floor, then up to station. That floor also has glass flooring or glass panel down, and everything at ground level down below that. Probably didn't just sell the Space Needle to everyone. That's because there's a lot of air traffic over the city.
Why is it so little?
I think my favorite skyscraper to talk about is the one that's just down to the right of that. It's a little off-white building with a pyramid-shaped roof on top. Far right side of skyline, off-white building. It's called the Spin Tower.
Yeah, but it looks like
That was the tallest building west of the Mississippi River. Maybe the tallest building on the west coast until 1962. Kind of goes to show you the last 62 years since the Space Needle was built, how much the rest of our skyline has grown. Mountains are out in the distance, so the mountains you see on to our right, just underneath the clouds. It's our non-volcanic mountain range of the Olympic Mountains. In fact, real fast, kind of a good little trick to use to kind of have an idea as to where we are right now compared to everything else. Everything in between your thumb and the rest of your hand, Puget Sound, the water's flowing in the rest of your hand is everything just like our right down the middle of the palm and north and south would be the Cascade Mountain range. So, can't quite see the Cascades right now, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea as to how we're situated here on the
కరెక్ట్ చాలా చాలా కూల్గా అనిపించింది.
పొద్దున బుక్ చేసిందా అమ్మ సాయంత్రం అమ్మ మళ్ళీ అదే 11ంటికి మారింది అదిగా మారింది అది అలా దీనికి కూడా అక్కడ అన్నీ అయింది అవుతుంది కదా డబ్బులు పెట్టాము ఇది కరెక్ట్ అయింది కదా
ఎవరు జగన్
అంటే మనం తీసుకున్న దాంట్లో 5 చోట్లు చూడొచ్చు వాడు తీసుకున్న దాంట్లో 2 చూసాం ఇది మూడోది ఇంకా 2
ఒకటి గ్లాస్ ఒకటి స్పేస్ నీడిల్ ఇది క్రూజ్ 3
3 అయింది ఇంకా 2 చూడొచ్చు
విత్ ఇన్ 7 days కదా 9 days
ఒకటి జూ ఒకటి ఇంకోటేదో ఉందంట అది చూస్తే అలా అది చూడడానికి ముందు ఇది అయ్యింది
it's one time visit or we can visit multiple times only one time that means we have covered most of the things then
అది 5 చోట్ల
Could expand a little bit on the dry docks, but we do have our wildlife opportunity just off to the right. So there are some sea lions over here up out of the water. If you find this like security fence that comes out around, find the big orange buoy underneath that crane. You'll see a couple sea lions on top of it, and then just start working your way around to the left, and you'll see several more sea lions up out of the water. Are all going to be male California sea lions. All males and all California sea lions. These California sea lions come up here right around Labor Day every year. In fact, this year I think they were like 3 or 4 days early, but right before Labor Day weekend they came up. And they're going to be here through the fall, through the winter, and then through much of the spring as well. The reason they're here is to basically bulk up a little bit. These are young juvenile males. They're here to feed on our salmon, kind of use Seattle as a gym for a few months. And then, once the spring hits, they'll head back to where the ladies are down on their native beaches with a better chance of competing in territorial rights. So we've actually never seen a female, scientists, researchers, people that are smarter than me, have never seen a female California sea lion out here in these waters. Only males. So really cool to again see these up out of the water. If you missed them earlier, there's some more almost directly off to our right now, a little bit farther back. Enjoying the sunshine here, like all of us are as well. Then as we get a little bit farther up, there's kind of another part in our tour where we've been seeing sea lions down in the water swimming around us. So just wait a few more minutes and you can see a couple more in action going after some salmon.
No, I'm not going down there to buy something right now.
Great question. When is orca season and when do we see them? We don't really have like an orca season necessarily, and it's just kind of random. Anytime throughout the year, we have the chance to see them. In fact, we didn't see any earlier today, but there were some reported sightings just a little bit farther out, just a little bit outside of the bay. We do have 3 resident pods of orcas or killer whales, the JK and L pods, that are here in this area. By this area, I kind of mean the Puget Sound, Salish Sea, and 75 individuals in those pods altogether. I've been used to saying 74, but there is a brand new baby orca born to the L pod just in the last 3 weeks or so. And then it sounded like the orcas that were around here earlier were some of the transient orcas, is what they're called, that travel longer distances and are in here from elsewhere. So we don't see it too often on this tour. There's just so much commotion going on out here in the bay, but it's not completely out of the question, and we always kind of get our hopes up a little bit when we hear some of those reports. One other thing I probably should have mentioned earlier is kind of the differences between the bodies of water that we're out on today. So far on our tour, we've been out on salt water. We've made basically about a 95% of a lap around Elliott Bay. And as we were crossing the bay there, we had the skyline off to our left, we had Bainbridge off to our right. We could have kind of said everything out closer to Bainbridge would have been more of Puget Sound, whereas everything between us and the skyline would have been Elliott Bay. Puget Sound is a big inland body of water. It's about 105 miles long, about 4.5 miles across on average. And then up to the north, there is a closest connection point to the Pacific Ocean. So if we were to head up to the north, before we hit the south end of Vancouver Island, we'd bend out to the west through the Strait of Wanapeka, and then would eventually be out to the Pacific from there. But by boat, it's about a 150-mile boat ride from where we are right now, truly to get out to the Pacific Ocean. I think probably the most remarkable part about this body of water is how deep it is. Again, it's usually only 4 or 5 miles across. It's about 400 to 600 feet deep on average. And there's some spots a little bit to our north that dip deeper than 900 feet. So it's like a big underwater canyon out here beneath us. So here we're gonna, so we're out on salt water. We're gonna deviate from our lap around the bay just a little bit to head into fresher water for the next couple minutes. Similar to the salmon, we're going to return from the salt water to the fresh water. We're going to cruise up the Duwamish River, the East Waterway, for a minute or two to check out our shipping port. There's a big container ship up ahead of us. Kind of having to thread the needle a little bit. By we, I mean Captain Steve in particular, who's doing all the work. But if we look off to our left as well as off to our right, on either side of us there are gill nets that are put out. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Some of the local Native American tribes, the Suquamish and Duwamish tribe, put out these gill nets to fish for salmon. So we have 5 of the 6 salmon species in the world living right here in these waters. Just missing the Atlantic salmon. Of course, the kind of late summer through the fall is when we see these salmon returning. These gill nets are basically just like curtains from the surface of the water down quite a ways, and basically have holes in the nets that are big enough for the small salmon to swim right through without getting caught. They're small enough where the large salmon get turned away and presumably can go and kind of continue that life cycle as they're getting close to the end of the life cycle, whereas the perfect size salmon will get stuck in the nets and then can get hauled in by the fishermen.
I'm not sure actually.
Yeah, this is that area where the sea lions often are swimming through the water. So just keep your eyes peeled. If you see some kind of torpedo out of the water all of a sudden, probably going to be one of those sea lions. They're pretty smart, and they know that these salmon are returning from the salt water to the fresh water. They also know that these nets are out here, and once these salmon get caught in the nets, they're pretty easy to pick off for the sea lions. Kind of save that for later if we see any, but I do want to just mention what we can kind of see around us right now. I'm going to start with what's off to our left. This is called Harbor Island. Excuse me, off to our right is Harbor Island. Harbor Island is a big man-made island, almost the exact shape of the state of Nevada. Built over 100 years ago, and was actually once the largest man-made island in the world. These days, this island is really an important part of our city. This is where the Port of Seattle has a big operation. They on and offload these big container ships. Actually, we're in luck today. There's a massive container ship up ahead of us that we can get really close to here in just a few minutes. Some of the container ships that you'll see have cranes on board. Those are usually smaller ones that'll go into smaller ports that don't have these big cranes at the ready. Most of the container ships we see in Seattle just rely on the cranes that are here on the docks. Actually, these big cranes, I think, are pretty fascinating. First off, it just takes one person to operate them. So that crane operator sits up a little glass box. They look down through their feet at a window down below. They can move these containers every like 60 to 90 seconds on average. The other thing that I didn't really, I don't know if I believed it until I really saw it, but these planes are fully assembled over in China and then loaded usually 4 at a time on top of one single ship. Cranes are standing upright on that ship, and then we'll cross the Pacific and come over to a place like Seattle. Once they get here to Seattle, they just slide them off onto the dock as you see them now, and they're pretty much ready to go. So that's the way they figure it. It makes the most sense to get them over here. I was thinking like the IKEA method of setting a box of parts over and having somebody assemble it on the side would make more sense, but it's not all figured out. Doesn't look like any of these cranes are in operation right now, but we do have this big container ship up ahead of us, which will probably start to get offloaded later on today or maybe tomorrow. This is the CGM Endurance. I guess this ship is probably right around 1,100 feet or so long. So again, the one up ahead of us, about 1,100 feet long would be my best guess. Similar to that cruise ship we saw earlier, put it on its stern, put it in our skyline. It's the tallest building by over 100 feet. Also, kind of in comparison to that big grain carrying ship we saw earlier, that one had all the red paint sticking up out of the water as it was empty. This ship just up ahead of us has what? Just a foot or two of red paint sticking up out of the water. You can see just how high this is loaded up right now. You're pressed to fit another container there on that ship. If anybody wants to do the math and fact check me on how many containers are on board here, feel free. I would say if it's only carrying the big 40-foot long containers, like we mostly see offshore, right, I would say this one probably has about 5,000 or so containers on it right now. For every one container you get bugged though, there's one more down below in the hole you're not able to see. So they load a lot of that cargo down below, allows it to be a little bit more secure there inside the hole. Also just allows it to be a little less top heavy going across the open waters. Yeah, get back to the shipping industry in just a sec, but off to our right, underneath the feet of these cranes over here, you'll see a big brick complex. On top of that brick complex, the Starbucks logo. It's the Starbucks corporate headquarters. So again, probably just over your right shoulder, big brick complex behind these cranes, and then the Starbucks logo on top. Starbucks, I would say, one of the biggest brands associated with our city, for good reason. Starbucks all over the place here in Seattle, and the oldest remaining one, as I mentioned earlier, is that one up at Pike Place. I will say here in Seattle, if you love Starbucks, coffee's going to taste pretty much the same here as it does in the Starbucks closest to your hometown. There are a couple cool exceptions, though. That one up the market, I think, is pretty unique in terms of the fact that they have like original logos on cups and other merchandise. That's the oldest remaining Starbucks. The other one that I think is really cool is the Reserve Roastery up on Capitol Hill. That's the most unique Starbucks in terms of what they have to offer on the everything from just a drip black coffee with nothing in it to an espresso martini and a pumpkin spice espresso latte, whatever. Everything in between, all sorts of different options. And again, that's the Reserve Roastery up on Capitol Hill. Alright, as we head back out of the waterway, since we've been going up into a river the last few minutes, so out of the river now, theoretically, farther and farther we head in this direction.
The first I felt cold, now it's okay.
Quick story though about the shipping industry, and I usually wait a little ways until we're kind of removed from those container ships behind us. The story goes, containers fall off into the water every once in a while. About 1,300 a year make their way into the water. 1,300 is just a small fraction compared to the 250 million containers that are shipped around the globe on an annual basis. Usually when it happens, it doesn't really make the news, but there are a couple stories that stand out, one of which was back in 1992. Container ship was crossing the Pacific, counter a storm, loose containers overboard. Inside of one of those containers, there's 28,000 rubber duckies and other bath toys. These rubber duckies floated to the surface when the container burst open, and people caught wind of this shortly after. A group of scientists and oceanographers said, it's kind of a bummer that all this stuff is floating around the Pacific, but we could probably learn something from this. So they got the word out there to people. They said, if you find a rubber duck on the beach, tell us where you found it, tell us when you found it, and tell us the serial number on the bottom, just so we're sure that this is one of those rubber ducks. Anyways, over the next 15 years, these things washed up here in Puget Sound, up off of Alaska, over in Hawaii, down in Australia, like all around the Pacific Ocean. And actually the last rubber ducky that was ever found was not in the Pacific, but actually over off of Scotland. Yeah, pretty long journey. Again, survived for 15 years or so before it finally landed on shore. There's a book written about it called Moby Duck, which is a pretty awesome title for. Yeah, so really, really amazing story. Again, we never wanted any of this stuff on into the water, but some unique stories. Alright, we're going to change and we are going to head back into Elliott Bay. As we do, let's talk a little bit of sports. In fact, just off to our right is T-Mobile Park. Dark gray roof on top of it. And T-Mobile Park is where the Mariners play their final game of the season. So just fell short of the playoffs once again this year. They ended with a win against the Oakland Athletics, which I see some A's fans on board. Our condolences. We kind of know how it goes a little bit. We lost the Sonics quite a few years ago, but again, really too bad that the A's are leaving. But again, baseball season just kind of wrapping up for us here in Seattle. That stadium over there, T-Mobile Park, is a cool spot. In fact, if we were playing into the fall, it would be nice. We wouldn't have to worry about any rain delays or rainouts. That roof is retractable, so anytime it starts to rain here in Seattle, they can roll the roof over and make sure we never have any games rained out, which again is a pretty useful feature for us here in Seattle. Now the Mariners, they moved out of the Kingdome back in the late 90s, and the Kingdome was a big multi-purpose dome where the Mariners and Seahawks played, and that's actually where Lumen Field is now. So Lumen Field has big white arches on top of it, and it's just to the left of T-Mobile Park. We'll talk a little football here in just a minute, but before we do, we're going to get our view blocked by some really cool ships off to our right. These are big Coast Guard icebreakers. Actually, anytime you see a U.S. Coast Guard ship with the all red paint on the hull like this, that means it's going to be an icebreaker. Allows it to stand out visually amongst the polar ice. Makes it a little bit easier to see. The number 20 here, this is the Healy, and the Healy is an icebreaker that's used really in large part for research. So it'll go up to the North Pole, conduct research up there, do circumnavigations in North America, and obviously travel in waters that not your average research vessel can travel through. And then just up ahead of that is the number 10, the Polar Star. Polar Star, another icebreaker, which is used a little bit more for big excursions down to the McMurdo Station in Antarctica. They'll resupply down there. It'll also help clear shipping lanes in the Arctic and kind of break up some of those icy waters.
It's very cold now again.
It will probably be blocked.
We are going back.
For a few minutes, but,
I think we have 1 hour time to enjoy the cruise.
The Sounders in the rain. Sounders had a 1-0 victory.
It might take around 10 minutes to get back to the
She has a match going
place.
on right now. I'm not sure if it's quite over yet, but should still be going. And then the Seahawks, our NFL team, probably the most well-known. The 3 teams that play there. They're back in Michigan to play Detroit tomorrow night on Monday Night Football. So the Seahawks are known for having a lot of fan base. And I guess Kansas City Chiefs shirt or sweatshirt on earlier on. We're the second loudest stadium in the NFL, just behind Kansas City. Thanks in large part to our fans. Our fans are really loud and passionate. Thanks maybe in larger part to the design of that stadium. Lumen Field has these big metal overhangs that come out over the top. It sort of traps that crowd noise inside of the building. It's
very cool.
Best example after this was 2011. We had a playoff game against the
correct.
Saints. Running back Marshawn Lynch ran for an iconic touchdown, broke a bunch of tackles, and as he scored, the fans got so excited that they created a 2-point at the center of Newman Fields. Verified by the University of Washington.
Yeah, correct.
It's like a real man-made.
It's very cold now. Now we have protection, so we don't feel any cold here.
She was in town. Both nights she performed 2.4 magnitude earthquakes created by Taylor. So definitely a really loud stadium, and if you ever get the opportunity to see a game or a match there, certainly recommend it. A couple more things to point out before we get back into our dock. We are still getting a nice look, at least at part of the Olympic Mountains off to our left. Some cool sun rays popping through the clouds out there. And one thing that I mentioned earlier on in our tour, but I left out an important detail. We talked about the Smith Tower, which is an off-white building with a pyramid-shaped roof on top of it. That pyramid up on top might be the coolest apartment here in Seattle. That's the 3-story, 1-unit apartment. Has a staircase that wraps around the inside of it, and then a balcony around the outside. So, not your average apartment in Seattle. Views out of all 4 directions. $13,500 a month rent cost, but again, pretty unique spot on top of this floor. We're gonna finish up our tour today with a look at one of these Washington State ferries. This is the ferry Tacoma. Looks like, which is just looks like cars off the ferry right now. So if you look kind of on the land side, there's some cars driving off. And these ferries can hold about 200 plus cars per crossing. And that Seattle to Bainbridge run carries more cars on an annual basis than any other individual ferry run in the world. So super popular run. Again, if you want to go to Bainbridge, I certainly recommend it. A lot of cool stuff to do on that side. If you don't have the time to go to Bainbridge, if you're limited a little bit, you don't want to go that far, I think Seattle's, like a lot of cities in the U.S., is best experienced by getting out to some of the surrounding neighborhoods, and you get a better feel for what Seattle's really like by doing some of that. So 2 neighborhoods that I do like to recommend to people are out to the north, Ballard and Fremont. A lot of cool little shops and restaurants, great breweries up there in those 2 neighborhoods. Those are, again, about 10 to 15 minutes from Seattle. So Ballard and Fremont to our north. Cool places to get out to if you don't want to go all the way over to Cambridge Island. With that, though, we're just kind of wrapping up our tour here, and I'm going to turn from the tour guide into the deckhand and get ready to go tie us up there at the dock. So down the boarding gate on the last place to see as you're stepping off the boat. If you have any last minute questions or want to chat on your way off the boat today, I just want to thank you for coming out with us. Hope you enjoy the last hour out here on the water, and enjoy the rest of this beautiful evening here in Seattle. Thanks again, folks.
We are going down? Huh? Okay, I'll see and come.
Alright, thanks Lars for the great tour. Hope y'all had fun out on the boat with us. We are approaching our dock here back at Pier 55. We will be able to walk this time. Lars does a fantastic job with the Also, before you leave, just take a moment to put down your seats and gather up all your personal belongings. Bags or coats, cameras, cell phones, sunglasses, anything like that on board will be fine. We are going to go on another trip after this one, and it is difficult to get that stuff back to you before that you're coming out. We will be boarding our next group of passengers at the same time that you're exiting the boat. You're going to board on the port side and make your way up the forward stairs. So we are going to close down the forward stairwells. And we do ask that you make your way down the back stairs, down to the first deck, and then exit off the right-hand side. But once we're fully secure and it's safe to step off the boat, I will get back on the microphone and let you know.
So I am Professor M.S. Rao. I am author of 53 books, including the award-winning book titled See the Light in You, for which the Nobel laureate His Holiness Dalai Lama has written a foreword. I have 43 years of diversified experience, including Indian Air Force, business, teaching, and training. Now I am in Seattle. I am enjoying the cruise, and we are returning back to the point where we started, and I think within 2 minutes we'll be back. ఒకసారి పట్టుకో, హోల్డ్ ఇట్, వ్యూ తీసుకో.
Al Pacino.
Hai nói tiếng Hoa bắt đầu có điều được.
So sorry.
Ý là đeo kính nó đừng có qua đó xuống. Còn không. నేను కూడా చెప్పాను రా ఇది అది ఉందండి అని అది లైన్లో వచ్చేస్తానండి నేను
Alright, we do have the ramp down on the starboard side, so feel free to make your way down the back stairs, down to the first deck, and then exit off the right-hand side of the boat. And once again, if you have any further questions for Lars, he will be down there at the gate. But thank you so much for joining us today. You enjoy the rest of your day here in Seattle, and hope to see you again out here in another Argosy cruise.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube.